It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 31, looking at the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode is looking at the players of Senegal. Part 1, the candidates. Here we go! Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 31 on the players of the 2025 African Cup. This episode covers Senegal's players. Just a note on where we're at in our mediacasts. We are publishing previews of the groups and teams of the 2025 African Cup at the same time as this series on the players. Last summer, we previewed the groups, teams, and players for the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. We also did a mediacast introducing ourselves. And after this African Cup, we will tackle the massive 48-team World Cup in the summer of 2026. So we start to plan. We plan to start publishing those episodes in the springtime of 2026. So keep an eye out for those. Okay, we're doing this mediacast on the players in two parts. Part 1 here is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We examine the participation of players in games over the recent period, as well as a couple of other factors, and categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, and seemingly off the squad. And we'll go into more detail on the players we think likely to reach the final squad, and less, perhaps, just even the names of players unlikely to get there. Part 2 will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. That'll probably be in mid-December. At that time, we'll go back over the list that we create today and see who made it and who didn't. And we'll also cover things like injuries and surprise selections. So this episode has 3 sections. In section 1, we look at some general information on the team. Section 2 is the main part. We look at the candidates and their likelihood of selection for the final squad. And finally, section 3 is summarizing and concluding, especially focusing on injured players to keep an eye on there. All right, let's begin then. So section 1, some information on the team. We had been doing big names who are off the squad. We're going to save that for sections 2 and 3. We'll give the details in section 2 and probably just the names there in our summary of section 3. So let's move on and look at club affiliations. What kind of clubs do the players of Senegal play for? Well, they do have a domestic league, but to be honest, players basically have to move out of Senegal to get onto the national team and play for a bigger team. So Africa and Asian teams, about 10% of the players play for other teams in Africa and Asia. So we're talking about Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and also players in Morocco, in the Moroccan league there. So the examples we're using here are actually teams that they play for or areas they play for. We have small to mid-sized clubs in Europe, making up about 5% of the amount of players. So an example of that is Norrköping in Sweden. But most of the players, 75% of them, actually play for top clubs in Europe. And, mostly that'll be France, Italy, and England. And we're going to give a couple of examples of clubs for each of those. In France, Lyon and Monaco. In England, for example, Tottenham and Everton. And in Italy, Udinese and Lazio. So pretty respectable clubs there. And about 10% of the players play for elite clubs. And by that, we mean Bayern Munich in Germany, not kind of, these again, real examples. Paris Saint-Germain in France, and a player with Al Nasser in Saudi Arabia, some of the higher paying Saudi clubs represented there. Okay, so that is pretty good compared to most African teams. In fact, it's very good, and that's part of the reason Senegal has been doing so well. Let's take a look at their recent games here in the build-up to the Cup. So we're examining the position of players from after the 2023 African Cup played in January of 2024. So we are going to start our narratives by looking back at what happened in the Cup. But in terms of judging their participation over the period, we're starting from after the Cup. And I believe that's 18 games that they've played. We'll go through them quickly here. So we have the 2023 African Cup in January of 2024. That was 4 games, but doesn't actually add to the count there. So we begin with 2 friendlies in March of 2024. And then we have 2 World Cup qualifying games for the 2026 World Cup in June of 2024. And in September, the African Cup qualifying for this tournament began. So there were 2 games in September 2024. In fact, that happened all during the fall of 2024. But we have to separate them here because after the September games, their manager, long-serving manager, was let go, and a new manager came in. So, in fact, we will see some changes under the new manager. Anyway, African Cup qualifying continued in October and November. So there were 4 games. So 6 games in all in the fall of 2024, and that completed qualification for this Cup. Moving on to 2025, in March, we have 2 games of 2026 World Cup qualifying. In June, 2 friendlies. And in September and October, they completed World Cup qualifying for the 2026 World Cup there. So that is as far as we go. And let's take a look at the formations that they used over that period. We won't go into detail here. We'll just summarize it for you. And they used 5 different formations over the period. A 4-2-3-1 formation in a third of those games, 6 of the 18 games, or 33%, and then a 4-3-3 formation in another third of the games. And in the last third of the games, 3 different formations, which we won't get into in detail. But we will analyze what those formation means. So what we have here is a 2-man central defense in 83% of games and a 3-man central defense in 17% of games. So usually a 2-man central defense. The 3-man central defense were really in at the beginning of the period in March and June of 2024. We'll talk about the midfield when we get there because we don't want to overcomplicate things. But up at the forward line, we have a single forward in 94% of games and a 2-man forward line in just 6% of games. So we're usually looking at a single forward. And I'll just say in the 4-3-3 formation, we consider that a single forward with a right attacking and left attacking midfielder there. So there we have a little bit on the formations. And the last order of business in section 1 here is a look at their upcoming games. They had 2 friendlies in November. They've already been played, but we prepared this mediacast based on games up until the end of October. So when we come to part 2, we will be looking at the lineups in these games. So in November, they played 2 friendlies. The first one was in England against Brazil. Pretty interesting. We're not really interested in the results here, but the lineups. But I will tell you, they did lose 2-0 to Brazil there on November 15th. And on November 18th, they played in Turkey. They played against Kenya in Turkey, and they won that game by a resounding 8-0. But as I said, we will look at those games in part 2 to help us predict what the final lineup or what the starting lineup is going to be. There are no games scheduled yet for December, but we do expect teams to play a couple of games before the tournament as warm-up. So we'll also include those in part 2 if we can. Okay, that's it for section 1. We move on to section 2, our main order of business here. Who are the candidates and what is their likelihood of making it? Well, we'll begin by talking about the manager situation. So we will talk about 2 managers in our narrative here. Let's introduce them. The first one is Pape Thiaw, and I'm not really sure how to pronounce this name. The Newcastle defender is being pronounced more like Chow, and that doesn't seem right. So I'll go with Pape Thiaw. But I'll have to get some clarification on how to actually pronounce that name. He is the new manager. He came in October, and the outgoing manager is Aliou Cisse. So let's go to the narrative here and tell you what's happened over the recent period. Aliou Cisse was the manager for 9 years, from 2015 to 2024. Now, Senegal did really good in that period, especially if you compare it with the period before or the longer history. They reached both World Cups there, 2 editions, and 4 editions of the African Cup under him, passing the group stage every time. In the World Cup 2022, it was a round of 16 finishes, one of their best finishes ever. And they took second place in the 2019 African Cup and the title in 2021. So they did very well. His contract was not renewed, though, well, the contract came up in August of 2024, but for some reason he stayed until October. And the reason given was largely because of a disappointing round of 16 finish in the 2023 African Cup. To me, that seems a bit harsh, maybe even a mistake, given that in the 5 African Cups before Aliou came in, Senegal failed to reach it twice and were knocked out at the group stage 3 times, to say nothing of not reaching the World Cup in the 3 campaigns before he came in. So I feel he's had a really successful period for Senegal. However, I've also heard mentioned that shaky starts to their qualification campaigns for the 2025 African Cup and the 2026 World Cup were also part of the reason that he was let go. His contract was not renewed. And by the way, Aliou Cisse has moved on to become manager of Libya's national team. Let's talk now about Pape Thiaw. He had briefly been an assistant manager. He came in October 2024, was an assistant manager under Cisse, and then caretaker manager in October when Cisse left. And in November, he was appointed the permanent manager. So he completed the last 4 games of the African Cup 2025 qualification. And it's true, Senegal had started a bit shakily with a home draw to Burkina Faso in the first game there. Under Thiaw, they won all games and they finished first, and that's why we're talking about them here. They qualified for this African Cup. As we saw in Section 1, they're also kind of doing World Cup qualification at this time. The first 2 games have been in November 2023, and again, they had started a bit shakily there. tying 2 of their 4 games that they had completed. One of those was in Togo, and the other was at home to Congo DR. So not a terrible start, but not a great start. Under Thiaw, they tied in Sudan in their first World Cup qualification game under him, but otherwise they won all the games to win the group and qualify for the 2026 World Cup. So Thiaw did lead them to success in both tournaments, and he is now their manager. Okay, let's take a look at Thiaw. We told you a little bit about his credentials there, but he was a player for Senegal from 2001 to 2003, and he earned 16 caps and 5 goals. And played for clubs in a lot of clubs, actually. He moved from club to club quite quickly. Played for clubs, I would say, mostly in France. There, but also Switzerland, Spain, and Russia. He did move around a lot there. He was part of 2 tournaments, the 2002 African Cup, where he subbed into game 1 and started game 2, subbing out at halftime of game 2, and also their famous World Cup 2002 squad, although he was only a substitute there and appeared in 1 game there in game 4. In terms of a manager, he has really not got that much experience. Senegal assistant manager for a short time under Aliou Cisse there, and then a club, one of the smaller clubs in Senegal, Nyari Tali in Senegal, but he does seem kind of part of the FA administration, Pape Thiaw. Anyway, let's see how he does. And we will move on to goalkeepers here. Okay, that was a pretty unsmooth transition, but nevertheless, we move on to and so what we're going to do here is begin by just naming the candidates and make you familiar with their names, and then we'll do a summary of the situation or of the position over the period, and then we'll come back and meet the main players in more detail. So we'll begin with definite candidate Mori Diaw. Definite candidate. Likely candidate Eduardo Mendy. And sorry, I got to make my page a bit bigger here. Also likely is Yevan Diouf. I'm trying something new here for the YouTube watchers. You'll see the color of the script of the names. So if it's in a black color, that means they have been through a tournament. If it's in light gray, it means they haven't been through a tournament. And if it's in orange, like Yevan Diouf here, it means they're new to the squad. And he is new to the squad. So likely candidates Edward Mendy and Yevan Diouf. And then possible candidates Samba Mbalo. And seemingly off the squad, Seny Dieng and Alfred Gomez. Okay, those are the cast of characters. Let's go to the story of the position. So Edward Mendy started all 4 games in the African Cup in January 2024. And for the most part, he remains the starting keeper, but he did miss 5 games over the period. In 2024, he was replaced by Seny Dieng. Seny Dieng had been injured for the Cup, but he returned from his absence to deputize here. Despite this, Seny Dieng was not selected in 2025, so he doesn't seem to have been that well liked by the new manager. He was replaced by newcomer, he being Seny Dieng, was replaced by newcomer Yevan Diouf, who played the first June friendly in 2025. With Mendy on the bench for that one. And Mori Diaw was on the bench throughout the period, and he had replaced Mendy in 1 game in 2025, and he also replaced him in the last match here in October 2025. So there we have it, Edward Mendy, the main keeper, but it looks to us like Maury Diaw is now the backup keeper, and a couple of the big names gone there. So let's look at these players in more detail. Even though he's not doesn't seem to be the starter, Maury Diaw is a definite candidate, and we'll tell you why. He's been with Senegal since 2023 and has 4 caps for the national team, and he's 32 years old, and he plays for Le Havre in France. He was born in France. Le Havre is a recent move for him from Clermont Foot, where he was before. Most of his clubs have been he's been kind of all over the place. He's played in Switzerland and in Bulgaria, but he was with the Paris Saint-Germain youth club for a long time there. So Maury Diaw, he was part of the African Cup in 2023, a backup keeper there on the roster, but saw no action. And Maury Diaw started 2. That would be the first game and the last game, 2 of their games over the period, and he was on the bench for 13 others. So just three matches he was not called up for. Okay, next we have the main keeper, Edward Mendy. We have him as, I'll tell you right now, we have him as a likely candidate because he wasn't called up for the last match, but we don't think that's a big deal. Edward Mendy's been with Senegal since 2018. He has 50 caps, and like Maury Diaw, he is 32 years old. He plays for Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia since 2023, but most famously played for Chelsea in England prior to that, from 2020 to 2023. Otherwise, he played in France, and he was born in France. He was a starting keeper for the African Cup in 2019. Was part of the squad in 2021. Out for COVID, actually, with games for games 1 and 2, but came back to become a starter. And then in the recent African Cup, their starter as well. So he's been the starter for quite a while, Edward Mendy, and over this period started 11 of their 18 games. So not only about 2/3 of them there. He was on the bench for 2 games and not selected for 4 others, including the last match. But we don't think his position is really in danger. We think really they were just trying out other keepers for the most part. Anyway, we put him as a likely candidate because wasn't there for the last game. Maybe they are considering a new starter there. The second likely candidate is Yvan Diouf, and he's brand new since 2025 with 1 cap for Senegal, and he's 26 years old and plays for Nice in France since 2025, and was with Reims, Stade Reims in France for 5 years before that. Yvan Diouf was born in France, like so many of the Senegalese players are, including the 2 goalies we've just introduced. Yvan Diouf got his first appearance on the bench in March of this year, 2025. As we saw, he started 1 game, and he was on the bench for the 7 others, so we consider him a likely candidate. Samba Mbalo is also new to the squad. He's just 22 years old, doesn't have any caps for Senegal yet, and is actually playing in Senegal. Actually, I thought none of their players were still with teams in Senegal, but he is. He's with Gori in Senegal, not one of their bigger teams, actually. Samba Mbalo got his first appearance for the senior team on the bench just recently in October 2025. And he didn't start that game, but he was on the bench for it, basically replacing Edward Mendy, who was absent. So just a possible, I would say pretty unlikely, actually, candidate, Samba Mbalo. And then seemingly off the squad are players goalkeepers who have been with the team for a while. We won't go into great detail, but Seny Dieng was the backup keeper in the 2021 African Cup, but he did actually start the first two games while Mendy was out with COVID. And then in the World Cup in 2022, he was also the backup keeper, or one of the backup keepers. Didn't see any action there. For the 2023 African Cup, he probably would, well, he was actually selected for the squad, but he was injured before the tournament and replaced. And he has not appeared for Senegal since November of 2024. He's just 31 years old, though, so it's not that he's aging out. So that's Seny Dieng. The other keeper on the seemingly off the squad list is Alfred Gomez. And again, we won't go into great detail, but he's been a backup keeper for all tournaments since the 2018 World Cup. So that is 2 World Cups and 2 African Cups. And the only one he actually saw action in was the 2019 African Cup, but he's been around for a long time. However, he has not been called up since the last African Cup in January of 2024. So Alfred Gomez seemingly off the squad. All right, that's it for goalkeepers. Let's move on to central defenders. I'll just remind you what we said in section 1. Usually a 2-man position in 83% of games, but sometimes a 3-man central defense in 17% of those games, and those games are all in March and June of 2024. Let's look at the candidates we have here. We have a definite candidate in Kalidou Koulibaly. And also definite Moussa Niakhaté and Abdoulaye Seck, all 3 of those definite candidates. We have a newcomer, Antoine Mendy, who's coded as a centre back, but we're going to deal with him as a right back because that's where he's been playing during this period. So we'll come back to him. Our next candidate is at the possible level. It's Abdou Diallo. And we also have a new candidate here, Mustafa Mbao, at the possible level. Another player who's coded as a centre-back, but who we've moved, is Formose Mendy. We've also moved him to right-back because that's where he's been playing. And so we are left with 2 seemingly off-the-squad players, Abdoulaye Ndiaye and Seydou Sano, who don't really feature in the narrative. That's what we're going to next. What's the story of the position over the period? And in the Cup, it was Kalidou Koulibaly starting all 3 games, but he was flanked by 3 different defenders in each of the first 3 games. We will name them because they all feature in the narrative going forward. So in one game, Moussa Niakhaté, and then Abdou Diallo and Abdoulaye Seck, each of them getting 1 start over the first 3 games. Game 4, though, was a 3-man defence, and it was Kalidou Koulibaly with Moussa Niakhaté and Abdou Diallo there. So Niakhaté and Diallo each got 2 starts there. Koulibaly getting 4 starts. Going forward, that basically was the situation. It was Kalidou Koulibaly starting almost all of the games, and then flanked by one of the other names that we have on our list. Most commonly, it was Moussa Niakhaté, and that includes the last few games, so that's what we're kind of going into the Cup with. Abdou Diallo was the partner 4 times until June of 2024, but then dropped off the squad after that. Abdoulaye Seck also joined in March and June when it was a 3-man defence, and he also started 1 game as left back, but not really one of the partners of Koulibaly there. Abdoulaye Seck only got 2 starts in 2025, but was on the bench throughout. and one of his starts was in September of 2025. So he's still in the picture, just not necessarily a starter. And no other players broke into that rotation. So we're going to see that with Senegal, that we're dealing with just a few players covering the position, not a wide variety of players here. Okay, so Kalidou Koulibaly is the main man. Let us introduce him. He's the captain of the team now. He's been with Senegal since 2015 and has 98 caps and 2 goals. Koulibaly is 34 years old and plays for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia since 2023. So, just like goalkeeper Edward Mendy, he was with Chelsea before moving to Saudi Arabia. He was only with Chelsea for a year, though. And otherwise played for Napoli in Italy, Genk in Belgium, Met in France. He is also French-born, Kalidou Koulibaly, and his first tournament was the 2017 African Cup. And basically, he's been a starter in all tournaments since then. Again, that includes 2 World Cups and 4 African Cups. And as I say, captain of the team actually from the World Cup in 2022 onwards. So Kalidou Koulibaly started 16 of their 18 games over the period, and on the bench for 1 and not called up for 1. So a permanent fixture in defence, Kalidou Koulibaly. The next one, also at the definite level, Moussa Niakhaté, and he is 29 years old and has been with Senegal just since 2023, so pretty new to the team. However, he has earned 22 caps and 1 goal. So once he came in, he got a lot of starts. Niakhaté plays for Lyon in France since 2024 and was with Nottingham Forest in England before that. He is also French-born. And his first tournament was the last cup in 2023. In January 2024. He started 2 of the games, as we saw in the narrative. And over the period, he started 12 of their 16 games. Koulibaly's main partner, Niakhaté, and he was on the bench for 4 others. So just 2 matches that Niakhaté was not selected for. So a definite candidate and probably the starter, I would say, alongside Koulibaly. But we also have another definite candidate in Abdoulaye Seck, and he's been with Senegal since 2013 with 20 caps and 2 goals and is 33 years old. He plays for Maccabi Haifa in Israel since 2022 and played for a couple of teams in Norway as well as Belgium. His first tournament was the 2021 African Cup. He was on the roster but saw no action, actually not even on the bench for any of those games. Not selected for the World Cup in 2022, but selected for the last African Cup, where he subbed into game 1 and started 1 game, as we saw. Abdoulaye Seck, over the recent period, has started 6 of their 18 games. And he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 9. The only match he missed was one that he was injured for. And he did play at least 1 game as I believe it was as a right back or left back. But Abdoulaye Seck really just coming in when they used a 3-man backline coming into the central defence. Okay, Abdoulaye Seck then, a definite candidate, at least for selection, not necessarily as a starter though. Let's move on to our possible candidates. The first one is Abdou Diallo, and he actually has an injury concern. So it's an unknown injury since late September, and his return date is unknown, so he might not even make the cup on that basis. He's been with Senegal since 2021 with 34 caps and 2 goals and plays for Al Arabi in Qatar. So Abdou Diallo was a starter in the 2021 African Cup and 2022 World Cup, starting all games in those cups, but not so much in the recent African Cup. In fact, over the period, Diallo started only 4 of their 18 games, but he was on the bench for 7. We see that he is injured. He was injured for the last 2 games in October there and not selected for 5 others. So Abdou Diallo, and this is not because of the injury, but because of his participation. Just a possible candidate here, almost at the likely level, though, I would say. The other possible candidate is the newcomer, Mustafa Mbao, and really hasn't gotten into the squad much. He has no caps for the national team and is 25 years old and plays for Paris FC in France. And he got his first appearance on the bench just recently in September 2025 and didn't start any of the 4 games he was there for, but he was on the bench for 3 and not selected for 1 other. So perhaps being considered to kind of bolster the squad here. 2 players on their way out. The first one is Abdoulaye Ndiaye, and well, he only has 1 cap for Senegal, but he was on the squad for the 2023 African Cup. Last appeared, though, in June of 2024. And on top of that, he has an injury hanging over him. Bone inflammation since late November with an unknown return date. So looking very unlikely, Abdoulaye Ndiaye. And finally, we have Seydou Sano. Just 1 cap for the national team. He was on the preliminary squad for the 2023 African Cup and did appear after, but last appeared on the bench in September 2024. That's Seydou Sano, so seems quite far off making the team here. Okay, that is central defence. Not a huge cast of characters there. Really just 3 or 3 or 4 defenders, I would say, rotating. And it looks like they need to bring in some more names like Mustafa Mbao there. Anyway, we move on to left backs here, and we begin with a definite candidate and newcomer, El Hadji Malick Diouf. And he's at the definite level. At the likely level is Ismail Jacobs, although he has an injury that we'll talk about. And then possible but unlikely, we have Moussa Ndiaye. And then seemingly off the squad, we have Fode Ballo-Touré. So those are the characters. Let's take a look at the position over the period. Ismail Jacobs started all 4 games in the last cup there, and he played as in game 4 of that. We saw it was a 3-man defence. He pushed up to being a left wing position. However, in March and June, when they used the same formation, he was not used in that position, but a more attacking player was put as a left winger. But he held the position of left back, Ismail Jacobs, under Aliou Cisse, the old manager, but under new manager, he only started the first game. And after that, only got 1 start. It was a newcomer, El Hadji Malick Diouf, who took over under the new manager, and he is now basically the player locked into this position. Diouf, in March of 2025, though, both of those players were injured. So it was 2 out-of-position players who stepped in to take over. So it looks like Diouf is a starter, Jacobs is a backup, and if both of them are out, it's out-of-position players, and I do think it was Abdoulaye Seck who was one of those players who stepped in. So let's look at the candidates' biographies. El Hadji Malick Diouf is new to Senegal since 2024, but over this period he has 12 caps and 1 goal. He's just 21 years old, and he plays for West Ham in England since 2025. He was with Slavia Prague in the Czech Republic before that, and he got his first cap in September of 2024 and started 8 of their remaining 14 games, as well as subbing in for 2. So that's really not adding up to his 12 caps. So I wonder. Oh yeah, they did have a couple of friendlies in July in the summertime, which we didn't count or mention, so it may have been one of those. Anyway, subbed in for 2, on the bench for 2, and injured for 2. So he was called up whenever available. He was never not called up. So El Hadj Malik Diouf, a definite candidate. At the likely level, now, despite starting all games in the previous African Cup, was Ismail Jacob, and he is actually out with a calf injury since late November and an unknown return date. So a pretty recent injury there, and we'll have to update him and other injuries in part 2 to see if anything has changed. Ismail Jacobs has been with Senegal since 2022. He has 24 caps and no goals for the national team, and is 26 years old. He was born in Germany, actually played for the Germany under-21 team there, but is currently with Galatasaray in Turkey. That's a recent move in 2025. He had been with Monaco in the French league prior to that. But basically, his youth clubs and first few clubs were in Germany. Ismail Jacobs' first tournament was the World Cup in 2022. He subbed into game 1 and then gained a starting position. And as we saw, was also a starter in the 2023 African Cup in all 4 games. Over the period, though, he only started 4 of their 18 games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 3. Did struggle with injury over the period. He was out with 2 separate injuries for 4 of the matches, and then not selected for 5 matches, including the last 2 matches. So, in short, he's basically lost his starting position under the new manager and seems to be the backup. But we don't think he's on his way out, even if he did miss the last 2 matches. We have Ismail Jacobs as a likely candidate. Possible but unlikely is Moussa Ndiaye, and he was part of the World Cup squad in 2022, just on the bench there, not selected for the African Cup in 2023, though. He did return during the period, though. In March of 2025, he returned after a 2-year absence. Didn't start any game, but was on the bench for 2 matches, but then not selected for the 6 matches after that. So Moussa Ndiaye kind of always on the outskirts of the Senegal team, and just a possible but unlikely candidate here. Finally, we have Fode Ballo-Touré. He's just 28 years old, a French-born player there, and was part of the last 3 tournaments, 2021 and 23 African Cups, as well as the World Cup in 2022, mostly a bench player there. But last appeared in January of 2024 in that African Cup. Hasn't been called up since then. So as I say, I mentioned his age because he's not kind of aging out, just not being selected. 28 years old, we could see him coming back into the fray. Okay, that is left backs. Let's move on to right backs. And we're going to see out of position players mostly in this position. Beginning with right midfielder Crépin Diatta. When I think of Crépin Diatta, I just think kind of all along the right side of the field, you may find him. So could be a right attacking midfielder or a right defender, Crépin Diatta. We also have the he was coded as a central defender. It's a bit unclear because he's new, but it's Antoine Mendy. We have him at the likely level. And maybe we just need a bit more time to determine where he is in defence. At the portable level, we also have a newcomer. It's Ile Camera. And then we have seemingly off the squad Mendy Formosa, also coded as a right back, but moved over here. So the only one who's actually coded as a right back right now is Ile Camera, but perhaps Antoine Mendy is a right back as well. Let's look at the position over the period. So even when we did the previous media cast for Senegal, they had trouble filling this position. And it ended up being right midfielder Crepin Diata playing all 4 games in the Cup. Diata was actually off the squad after the Cup for about a year, no, less than a year. He came back in under the new manager in November, and he resumed his control of the position for the rest of the period. Although Diata did play in out-of-position roles in a couple of games. While he was gone, though, it was mostly central defender foremost Mendy as the starter, although Mendy is now off the team. Crepin, as we said, did play 2 games out of position in 2025, and it was Antoine Mendy replacing him in those games. Okay, so let's look at Crepin Diata. He seems to be holding down the position for the time being, and he's been with Senegal since 2019 with 52 caps and 2 goals. He is 24 years old. No, 26 years old, sorry, and plays for Monaco in the French league since 2021. He's been part of the Senegal squad since the 2019 African Cup, where he started half of the games in that tournament, was injured for the 2021 African Cup, but part of the squad, again, starting some or all of the games for the 2022 World Cup and all of the games in the most recent African Cup there. I don't know if I made that clear. He started some games in the 2022 World Cup and all games in the 2023 African Cup. Anyway, as we said, he was off the team after the Cup for a period. He returned after a 10-month absence in November 2024 and then started all 10 of their remaining games. So it looks like he was a bit out of favour after the Cup under Aliou Cisse, but he's the main choice under Pape Thiaw there. The likely candidate is newcomer Antoine Mendy. He has been with Senegal since 2025, has 4 caps, and is 21 years old. He's French-born and plays for Nice in France since 2022. Doesn't have any tournament experience because his first cap was during this period in March of 2025, and he started 2 of their remaining 8 games and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 5 others. So again, 1 game, maybe a friendly that we didn't count as well. So Antoine Mendy, a likely candidate for selection to the squad. At the possible level, we have Ile Camara. He's been with Senegal since 2025 and has 2 caps for the national team, is 22 years old and plays for Anderlecht in Belgium since 2025. Ile Camara was born in Belgium, so was with Belgian clubs. He also got his first appearance on the bench in March of 2025. He started 1 of their remaining 6 games and subbed in for 1, and then was on the bench for 2. And in fact, the only 2 matches he missed were because he was injured. So, but he is fairly new, and they look like they are trying out some right backs over here. So we have Ile Camara as a possible candidate. And finally, we look at foremost Mendy, a central defender, but during this period played over here on the right, as we saw, replacing Krapin Diatta early in the period, but he last appeared for the national team in November of 2024. So we won't go into more detail. If he is recalled, we'll probably give a bit more information on him. But foremost, Mendy seemingly off the squad. Okay, that is it for the defense, and we move on upfield to the defensive and central midfielders. We're going to do these as one group. Let me just talk a little bit about the position over the period. We saw in section one that they used a 4-3-3 formation in a third of the games, and in fact, over the period, it was a two-man midfield in 56% of the game, so just over half. But in 44%, or just under half, it was a three-man midfield. So we're dealing with 2 to 3 positions here. Let's look at the candidates. There really is not much distinction between defensive and central midfielders, even when it is like defensive midfielders in a 4-2-3-1 formation. We might see the central midfielders there. So the distinction is a bit unnecessary here, but we'll use the positions that the players are coded in. So for defensive midfielders, we have a likely candidate in Pape Gueye, and a possible candidate in Mamadou Camara. I'll just talk a little bit about him because his name is actually Mamadou Lamine Camara, and many sources have him as Lamine Camara, which is very confusing because shortly we're going to meet a candidate who is called Lamine Camara, so there are basically two of them. So we're going to call this defensive midfielder Mamadou Camara to try to avoid confusion. And I gotta say, there's confusion even among my sources. They get them mixed up. So we'll talk about that if necessary. So Mamadou Camara, a possible candidate. Also at the possible level, we have Nampalys Mendy and Cheick Niasse. And then we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Dion Lopi. That's it for defensive midfielders. Let's take a look at the cast of characters for central midfielders. And here we have 3 definite candidates. The first one, Idrissa Gueye. Then Pape Matar Sarr, also a definite candidate. And finally, Habib Diarra. He's an injury concern, which we'll talk about when we get to the biographies. Here at the likely level, we see Lamine Camara, the other Lamine Camara, and we will call him Lamine. He's at the likely level. We also have Pathé Ciss at the likely level, and then 2 players at the seemingly off the squad level. The first is Cheikhou Kouyaté, and the second, Rassoul Ndiaye. So we're looking at a pretty large group of players here, but keep in mind we are filling 2 to 3 positions here. Let's look at the position over the period then. Even going into the previous media cast, or in the previous media cast going into the previous cup, the position had been filled by a variety of players, and we couldn't really predict a starter going into the cup. In fact, we thought Nampalys Mendy seemed the most likely starter. But in the cup, it ended up being most of the main candidates, or some of the main candidates we looked at here, but each of them starting 2 or 3 of the games, none of them starting all of them. So since players did come in and out so much before, during, and after the cup, the easiest way to summarize it is by going through the participation of each of the main candidate. And we'll generally do that in order of how much they appeared. So oddly, the player who appears the most over the period was the one who didn't start any games in the cup. He just subbed into 3 of the games. I'm talking about central midfielder Idrissa Gueye here. However, after the cup, he was the most steady presence in the midfield, starting 14 of the 18 games. So Idrissa Gueye, at least, is pretty much a staple in the midfield here. Next, we have central midfielder Pape Matar Sarr, who was on the bench for the first game of the Cup and then came in and started the last three games. Over the period, though, he only started half of the games. He started 9 of the 18 games. That's Pape Matar Sarr. However, there's no pattern to that. It runs through the period, his starts, and it's virtually every other game. Pape Matar Sarr. Next, we have newcomer, central midfield Habib Diarra. He wasn't part of the Cup. He came in after the Cup. But like Pape Matar Sarr, he also started 9 of the 18 games, or half of them. In his case, though, that was more towards the beginning of the period, because towards the end, injuries interfered with Habib Diarra's starts. Next, we have Pape Gueye, the defensive midfielder. He started the first 3 games of the Cup, but then was not selected for the 4th match. Over the period, he started 8 of the 18 games, so also almost half of them. In his case, it was mostly in the fall of both years, in the fall of 2024 and in the fall of 2025, the most recent games. So that is Pape Gueye's involvement. Next, we have Lamine Camara, and we're talking about the central midfielder, not Mamadou Camara here. Lamine Camara started 3 games of the Cup. That's games 1, 2, and 4. However, his starts were sporadic throughout the period. But three of them were over 4 games in March and June of 2024. Well, that was his period of heaviest involvement. The other Lamine Camara, Mamadou Camara, was not selected for the Cup. My main source has him starting 3 games over the period, but there is confusion because other sources have some of those games as being started by the other Lamine Camara. So anyway, apart from being credited for those 3 starts on my main source, though, he's rarely even called up. So that's Mamadou Camara. Finally, we have Nampalys Mendy. He was our most likely starter going into the Cup. Although, as I mentioned, he had come in with an injury concern. He did start game 3 there, but only had 1 start over the period after the Cup, and that was just after the Cup in March 2024. So basically has not been involved. We'll see when we get to the bio of him, but has not been involved as a starter there. So a bit ironic that he was the one player we did think most likely and hasn't really played much. Okay, let's look at what things look like at the end of the period, though. So in the September 2025 games, it was a 3-man midfield, and 5 different players were used over the 6 games. Only Pape Gueye starting twice in the September games. In the October games, it was a 2-man midfield, central midfield, defensive midfield, actually, a 4-2-3-1 formation. Idrissa Gueye started both of those games, and in one of those games, it was alongside Pape Matar Sarr, and in the second game, Pape Gueye partnered with Idrissa Gueye. So again, just like the previous media cast that we did on Senegal, pretty confused in the central midfield, but Idrissa Gueye, the main player, probably Pape Gueye after that. Okay, let's look at the candidates, their bios. So Idrissa Gueye has been with Senegal since 2011, 127 caps and 7 goals for him. He's 36 years old, and he's been playing with Everton in England since 2022 and was with Paris Saint-Germain for 2 years before that. Yes, and he's been part of African Cups or part of tournaments since the 2015 African Cup, where he was a starter. And of course, we won't go through all of those, but he has been part of all of those, usually as a starter. In 2019, he was named to the team of the tournament there. Only in the recent African Cup, as we saw, was he subbed into games 2 and 3, but we also saw that he was their main starter over the period, starting 14 of their 18 games there. He was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3 others. So a main candidate here, Idrissa Gueye. And I realized I just started with defensive midfielders there. So I'm going to go back. Sorry, I started with the central midfielders. I should have started with defensive midfielders. So let's go back to Papa Gueye, the likely defensive midfielder here. And he has been with Senegal since 2021 with 34 caps and 3 goals. He's 26 years old and plays for Villarreal in Spain. He was with Marseille in France before that, from 2020 to 2024, and with Watford briefly in England. He has been part of tournaments since the 2021 African Cup, selected for all tournaments since then, usually as a substitute, but in the recent African Cup he did start games 1, 2 and 3, and over the recent period he started 8 of their 18 games, as well as subbing in for 3 and on the bench for 2, but he was there were 5 matches that he was not called up for. So Pape Gueye, a likely candidate. The first of 3 possible candidates is Mamadou Camara. He's been with Senegal since 2023 with 6 caps and 1 goal. He's just 22 years old, and he plays for Renaissance Berkane in Morocco since 2021. He was on the preliminary squad for the last African Cup, but didn't make the final cut. But over the recent period, he started 3 of their 18 games. Again, a little bit of doubt about that, but started 3, on the bench for 2, and not selected for 13 others. So that is Mamadou Camara. Next, we have Nampalys Mendy. He's been with Senegal since 2021 with 35 caps and no goals, and is 33 years old. He recently moved to Watford in England since 2025 and was with Lens in France before that, and Leicester in England for quite a long time, 2016 to 2023. Nampalys Mendy was born in France and has been part of tournaments since the 2021 African Cup. There, as we saw, though, we kind of expected him to be one of the starters in the recent Cup, but he was actually just a sub in 1 game. Oh, I see. He did start and finish 1 game. Which I think we said in the summary there. But over the period, Nampalys Mendy only started 1 of their 18 games. He was subbed in for 4, but that includes the last match, so he's still in the picture. Subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 3. Not selected for 10 others, but he did come back for the games in October, so is still part of the picture here. And we have Nampalys Mendy as a possible candidate. The last one is new to the team, Cheick Niasse, and he has been with Senegal since 2025 with 1 cap, and he's 25 years old. Cheick Niasse plays for Hellas Verona in Italy. That's a recent move in 2025. He was with Young Boys in Switzerland for 3 years before that. So he got his first appearance on the bench in June of 2025. He didn't start any of the remaining 6 games, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3. Though not selected for 2 matches, including the last match there. So Cheick Niasse, a possible candidate here. Finally, we have Dion Lopy. He's been kind of on the edge of the Senegal team for quite a while. Actually, his stats make that clear, because he's been with them since 2019, but only has 5 caps for them, has never been part of a squad. So I won't go into too much detail, but he was subbed in for 2 games over the period and on the bench for 3, but not selected for the last 6 matches, Dion Lopey. So maybe we'll go into more detail if he is selected for the final squad. Now it's time to move on to central midfielders. I already did the veteran Idrissa Gueye. So let's move on to the second definite candidate, Pape Matar Sarr. And he's been with Senegal since 2021, but already has 36 caps and 4 goals for them. He's just 23 years old, and he plays for Tottenham in England since 2021. That may be longer than a lot of people think, because he seems fairly new to Tottenham. That's because he was out on loan for the first couple of years there. Pape Matar Sarr. He's been part of tournaments since the 2021 African Cup, just a sub there, and in the 2022 World Cup. In the 2023 African Cup, we saw he was on the bench for game 1, but gained a starting position for the last 3 games. Seems to be becoming a bit more important to Senegal here. Pape Matar Sarr started 9 of their 18 games. As well as subbing in for 5 and on the bench for 2. So just 2 matches that he was not called up for, and that's the main reason we have him as a definite candidate here, Pape Matar Sarr. Next we have the third definite candidate, Habib Diarra, and I'll just start by saying he is out for a groin injury. He was out for groin surgery, I should say, since mid-September. However, he is expected back in mid-December there. So Habib Diarra has been with Senegal since 2024 with 13 caps and 4 goals. That's a pretty good scoring ratio. He's just 21 years old, and he's with Sunderland in England, part of their big hiring as they moved into the Premier League. So since 2025, prior to that, he was with Strasbourg in France from 2021 to 2025, and hasn't been part of any tournament, so fairly new to the team, but he scored 3 of their 10 goals in qualifying for this tournament, and that includes a late winning goal against Burkina Faso there, and got his first cap right at the beginning of the period after the Cup in March of 2024, and he, like Pape Matar Sarr, started half of the games, 9 of the 18 games, as well as subbing in for being on the bench for 1. The only matches he missed were because of injury. He was out with 2 separate injuries, and that does include the last 2 matches there. But as we see, he looks like he'll recover from that. And we'll update that in part 2. Hopefully he'll have played some games for his club. Okay, the first of the 2 likely candidates is Lamine Camara. He too was out of the October games. He was out with an ankle sprain from late September, but he has played for his club since from November 2020, November 25th. He has played for his club, so he seems fine now. Lamine Camara has been with Senegal since 2023 and has 33 caps and 6 goals, but is just 21 years old, so really coming into the team strongly here. Lamine Camara plays for Monaco in the French league since 2024 and was with Metz in France prior to that. He was born in Senegal and played for clubs in Senegal before moving to France. Lamine Camara was a part of the 2023 African Cup. He started 3 of the games and was on the bench for 1 of them. And over the period, Lamine Camara has started 6 of their 18 games, as well as subbing in for 5 and on the bench for 1. We saw he was injured for the last 2, so that leaves just 4 matches that he was not called up for. So Lamine Camara, a likely candidate here. The other likely candidate, Pathé Ciss, really is only a substitute, so not really part of the narrative here, but he's been on the team the national team since 2022 with 24 caps and no goals, and he is 31 years old and plays for Rayo Valenco in Spain since 2021. He was selected for the World Cup in 2022, and he subbed into game two there, 64 minutes in, and then gained a starting position for the following two games. But in the 2023 African Cup, just subbed into two games for that one. Over the period, he's only started one of their 18 games, but he has subbed in for six and been on the bench for nine. So only two matches that he was not selected for. So we have him as a likely candidate, even though he doesn't seem to be a starter. That's Pathé Ciss. Our seemingly off the squad is a veteran, Chaku Kiate. He was captain of the team in the 2017 and 2019 African Cups, as well as the World Cup in between. So a big player for them. But we won't go into a lot of detail on him. He's been part of African Cup since the 2015 African Cup, and was part of the squad for all tournaments, including the last African Cup. He just subbed into one game there, and even appeared after the Cup in March of 2024, but that was his last appearance for the team. So it looks like farewell to Chaku Kiate. He is 36 years old there. And the other possible but unlikely candidate is Rasul Ndaye, and he has not been selected for the last six matches. So early in the period, he subbed in for one and was on the bench for the next one, and then not called up. So that would make March 2024 his last appearance. Okay, those are all the candidates. That is a lot to go through. And we move on upfield. We do have categories for left and right midfielders. They seem to be going out of style. However, we do have Crepin Diatta coded as a right midfielder. As I said, when we introduced him as a right back, he can kind of be found all up and down the right side of the field. We talked about him as a right back because that's where he's been playing over the period. So we can move on upfield to the attacking midfielders, and we begin with the left side. And so this covers three positions actually. In a say 4-4-2 formation, it would be a left winger. In a 4-2-3-1 formation, a left attacking midfielder, and a 4-3-3 formation, a left forward. And funnily, they did use, I don't know if funnily is an adjective, but they did use all three of those positions in the cup. So we see the players covering all of those, and that's why we put them together, because it is often the same players covering the position, no matter which one it is. Here for candidates, we have a definite candidate in Sadio Mane, and then a likely candidate in Czech Sabali. And that's all we have over here. So let's talk about the position. Sadio Mane started all four games of the Cup and really dominated this position throughout the period. He did miss a few games, and we're going to see that sometimes the players up front here kind of switched around. So we're not going to complicate things by talking about those switches, but sometimes he did play in the center or on the right for one or two games. But we'll call him a left attacking midfielder. When he was absent, he was replaced by one of the other players he switches around with, a right attacking midfielder or a central attacking midfielder. Usually that would be Ismail Assar or Iliman Ndiaye, who we'll meet shortly. Anyway, dominates the position, Sadio Mane. Let's take a look at his biography a little bit. Well, we could make a long story out of this. He has been with Senegal since 2012 with 121 caps and an impressive 52 goals. And he's 33 years old now. He plays for Al Nasser in Saudi Arabia since 2023 and was with Bayern Munich for a year before that, but a long time with Liverpool in England, of course, and then Southampton prior to that. So Sadio Mane, very important player. He's been part of tournaments since the 2015 African Cup there. Yeah, we won't go over the details. Basically, a starter in most of the tournaments, named to the team of the tournament in 2019 when they finished second. But he was actually injured for the World Cup in 2022. So that was the only tournament he missed over the period. For World Cup qualifying in 2026, he scored five of their 22 goals. He was the top scorer for Senegal. And for this tournament in qualification for the 2025 African Cup, scored three of their 10 goals. So he was their co-top scorer here. Over the period, Sadio Mane has started 13 of their 18 games, as well as subbing in for one. He was injured for two and not selected for two there. So Sadio Mane, a definite candidate. The likely candidate is Cheick Sabali. He's been with Senegal since 2023 with 10 caps and one goal. And he plays for Metz in France for a long time, since 2018 there. He was selected for the preliminary squad for the last African Cup, but didn't make the final cut, and actually returned after a 14-month absence in November of 2024. He didn't start any of their remaining 10 games, but he was subbed in for 7 of them, including the last 4, as well as being on the bench for 1. So just 2 matches since coming back that he was not selected for. So we do have Cheick Sabali as a likely candidate, although that'll probably be a bench position. Even when Mane is out, he doesn't get a start. Okay, that's the left attackers. Let's move left attacking midfielders. Let's move over to the right attacking midfield. Here we have a definite candidate in Ismaila Sarr. And just one other candidate at the possible level, Abdallah Sima. So let's look at the position over the period. In the Cup, it was Ismaila Sarr starting all 4 games. He continued to start most games after the Cup, but under the new manager from October 2024, only about half of the games after that. We saw he's one of the 3 players kind of rotating up front. So he did play several games on the left attacking midfield. And when he was out of this position on the right, his position was actually filled by forwards at first, most notably Habib Diallo, but increasingly by Iliman Ndiaye under the new manager. In fact, under the new manager, the position could be seen as being shared by Ismaila Sarr and Iliman Ndiaye. A few players were tried out in single appearances, but in the fall of 2025, it was quite firmly Sarr and Ndiaye kind of sharing the position. And we'll meet Ndiaye. We have him coded as a central attacking midfielder, and you'll see why when we get there. So we don't put his name here, but we'll get to him shortly. Ismaila Sarr, though, let's take a look at his biography. He's been with Senegal since 2016 with 76 caps and 18 goals, and is 27 years old. Playing for Crystal Palace in England since 2024, and prior to that he played for Marseille in France and Watford in England and a couple of clubs in France there. But he was born in Senegal and played for a youth team and his first club in Senegal. Ismaila Sarr has been part of tournaments since the 2017 African Cup. We won't go through them all, but he was a starter in most of them, but not all of them. And most recently in the African Cup, he, as we saw, started all 4 games of the 2023 edition. He has also scored goals in both qualifications here. 1 of their 10 goals in qualification for this cup, and 3 of their 22 goals in qualification for the World Cup. Over the period, Ismaila Sarr has started 11 of their 18 games, as well as subbing in for 3. He was on the bench for 1, and the only matches he missed were 3 matches due to 2 separate injuries. So always called up when available, and Ismaila Sarr, a definite candidate here. The next one is Abdallah Sima, and he's at the possible level. Been with Senegal since 2021 with 10 caps and no goals, and he is 24 years old, and he plays for Lens in France. That's a recent move in 2025, having played with Brighton in England from 2021 to 2025. He was on their roster at least, because he won't be familiar really to Brighton fans, because he was loaned out for most of the time, including to Rangers in Scotland and Stoke in England there. Abdallah Sima was on the preliminary squad for the 2022 World Cup, but not selected. He was selected for the last African Cup, but he saw no action in that cup. He was on the bench for game 1, and then presumably injured in training, because he was not on the bench for any of the games after that. Sima has only started 1 of their 18 games over the period, subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 3. But there were 8 matches that he was not selected for. He was also injured for a couple of games. So Abdallah Sima just at the possible level here. Okay, that is it for right attacking midfielders. So not a lot of candidates. The pattern seems to be like we have 1 main starter and then 1 backup player who really rarely gets on the field. Let's go to central attackers, where we don't even have that. We just have a main starter, and that is Iliman Ndiaye. But let's talk about the position first. This position of central attacking midfield is only used in about 1/3 of the games. But we do see Iliman Ndiaye starting in other positions when this position is not in use. I haven't put his name on the list here. So Iliman Ndiaye is a definite candidate here. And yes, the position was not used in the Cup, and Iliman Ndiaye didn't start any games in the previous African Cup, just a substitute there. When it was used, it was usually him, but it seems, especially under the new manager, the new manager wants to have him on the field, and B, he's playing increasingly as a right attacking midfielder. But we did see him on the left attacking midfield as well. I think he even started 1 game as a forward. So under the new manager, he's on the field somewhere. Let's take a look at his bio. He's been with Senegal since 2022 with 33 caps and 3 goals. Iliman Ndiaye is 25 years old, currently playing for Everton in England, and since 2024, and was with Marseille in France before that, and actually Sheffield United in England from 2019 to 2023. So he was born in France, Iliman Ndiaye, and was part of the World Cup 2022 squad, subbed into game 2 there. then gained the starting position for games 3 and 4. But as we saw for the previous African Cup, just a substitute, although he did come into all 4 games. But over the recent period, especially under the new manager, he's been a starter. He has started 12 of their 18 games and subbed in before. The only 2 matches he missed were due to injury. So always called up and therefore a definite candidate here. All right, that's it for the midfield. And we jump to forwards. And I'll just remind you of what we said in part 1 here. It is a single forward most of the time in 94% of games. Only in 6 games, I think that's just one of the 18 games, did they use a 2-man forward line. Let's look at the candidates. So we have as a definite candidate Nicholas Jackson. And also a definite candidate, Sharif Ndiaye, although he's not a starter. At the possible level, we have, that's likely level, we have Boulaye Dia, although there's an injury tag on him, as well as Habib Diallo at the likely level and with an injury tag. And our seemingly off the squad, Bamba Dieng, also has an injury tag on him too. So the forwards struggling with injury here. Let's look at the position over the period then. It was actually in the Cup, Habib Diallo playing as a single forward in all 4 games of the Cup. And he went on to start 3 of the next 4 games after that, although 2 of those were not as the forward, but as a right attacking midfielder. Over the period, though, Habib Diallo drifted off the squad, starting only once more in March of 2025. It's Nicholas Jackson increasingly taking over the position, although Jackson was out for several games. And when he was out, those who replaced him were often there only just for a game. So no one we can really focus on except Boulaye Dia. He was the only one with more than 2 starts when it came to replacing Jackson. And that includes the first game in September 2025, quite recently. However, after that, Jackson returned to regular starts for the last 3 games. So let's take a look at Nicholas Jackson. Actually coded as a right attacking midfielder, but we're probably going to change that because he seems to be playing as a forward for both club and country now. Jackson has been with Senegal since 2022 with 26 caps and 5 goals. And he's 24 years old. He's actually still on the roster at Chelsea in England, been with them since 2023. However, he's currently on loan to Bayern Munich in Germany since 2025. Before Chelsea, he was with Villarreal in Spain. And Nicholas Jackson is born in Gambia, actually. His first tournament was the 2022 World Cup, just a substitute there, and actually just a substitute in the previous African Cup too. So for Senegal, struggling as a starter, but has been over the recent period. He started 11 of their 18 games here, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and the only games he missed were 3 games due to 2 separate injuries. So Nicholas Jackson now a definite candidate and now more of a starter than he has been over the previous couple of years. The other definite candidate is Sharif Ndiaye. He's been with Senegal since 2024 with 10 caps and 2 goals and is 29 years old, so a bit of a late joiner to the national team. He plays for Samsunspor in Turkey. That's a recent move in 2025, having played with Red Star Belgrade in Serbia for a couple of years before that. Sharif Ndiaye has not been involved in any tournaments. He got his first cap in June of 2024 but only started one of their remaining 16 games over the period. However, he was subbed in for 7 games and on the bench for the 8 others. So he has been regularly called up since June 2024, and we have him as a definite candidate to make the squad. But he hasn't made much inroads in terms of getting starts. The first of our possible candidates, first of our likely candidates is Boulaye Dia. And I'll just start by talking about his injury. He was out for the October games with an ankle injury, but he has since recovered and played for his club. So no worries there. Boulaye Dia has been with Senegal since 2020 with 36 caps and 7 goals. And he's 29 years old and plays for Salernitana in Italy since 2023. But he is on loan to a bigger club, Lazio in Italy, since 2024. And he, like Nicholas Jackson, played for Villarreal. They were teammates together there from 2021, to 2022, because he was loaned out for the second year there. Boulaye Dia was born in France, and the 2021 African Cup was his first tournament. He started the first 5 games of that tournament. And in the World Cup 2022, he was also a starter. Started all 4 games, but was not selected. Well, he actually was selected for the African Cup in 2020. In January 2024, but he had to pull out due to injury, and he was replaced by Bamba Dieng. Over the period, Boulaye Dia has started 4 of their 18 games, as well as subbing in for 5 and on the bench for 1. As we saw, he was injured for the last 2, but that's something he's recovered from. And he was not selected for 6 of the matches over this period. So we have Boulaye Dia as a likely candidate. The other likely candidate is Habib Diallo, also with a injury, but a more serious one, a hamstring injury from mid-November 2025 with an unknown return date. So hamstring injuries can be long-term, but sometimes they can just be short-term. So we'll have to see. We'll update it in part 2. Habib Diallo has been with Senegal since 2018 with 37 caps and 8 goals, and he's 30 years old, and he plays for Metz in France. Actually his second stint with them since 2025. He was with Al Shabab in Saudi Arabia prior to that, and otherwise with French teams. He was part of the 2021 African Cup, just subbed into a couple of games there. Not selected, though, for the 2022 World Cup, but came back to the squad for the 2023 African Cup, where he started, as we saw, all 4 games there. However, over the period, he started only 4 of their 18 games over the period. We saw those were pretty much at the beginning of the period, including 2 games starting as a right attacking midfielder. Otherwise, he was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 3. So just 4 matches that Habib Diallo was not selected for, and a likely candidate. But that injury does seem to put him at risk here. The last candidate on our list is Bamba Dieng. We won't go into much detail because not only is he seemingly off the squad, having last appeared in March of 2024, but he's also out with a stretched ligament injury from early November of 2025 with an unknown return date. So a couple of factors working against him for being selected to the squad. But he is just 25 years old, so and he's actually been a part of all tournaments since 2021, so I'm sure we'll see Bamba Dieng again. All right, that is it for the forwards, and it brings us to the end of section 2. And so we move on to section 3, and we want to welcome new listeners here. because we are releasing Section 3 as a short version of Part 1 on Senegal's players. In the full version, then, in Sections 1 and 2, we introduced a bit about the team and the candidates and their likelihood of making the final squad. So we went into quite a bit of detail on that and on the kind of career information on the main players there. So if you want those details, you can get Part 1. We have a link to that in the show notes here. In terms of our review of the candidates here, we are not concerning ourselves with predicting starters. We're going to do that in Part 2. But here we're just looking at their likelihood of reaching the squad. So let's begin with the manager. We have Aliou Cisse, manager for 9 years, replaced in October of 2024 by Pape Thiaw. And yes, so that is a big change there. So Pape Thiaw will consider him a definite candidate here. For goalkeepers, we have a definite candidate in Maury Diol, but the starter is the likely candidate, Eduardo Mendy, or he has been starter over the period, but he missed the last game. That's why we have him at the likely level. And we have also Yevan Diouf, a newcomer to the squad at the likely level, and then a possible candidate in Samba Mbalo. And normally I won't talk about the possible but unlikely or seemingly off the squad players, but on the way out here we have Seny Dieng and Alfred Gomez. They have been backup keepers over the past few tournaments, but seem to be off the squad now. For defenders, we look at central defenders, 3 definite candidates in Kalidou Koulibaly, Moussa Niakate, and Abdoulaye Seck. No candidates at the likely level, but at the possible level, Abdou Diallo and Mustafa Mbao, both possible candidates. Over to the left back position, we have a definite candidate in El Hadj Malik Diouf, seems to be favoured under the new manager, and less favoured is Ismail Jacobs. He's at the likely level, though. Those are the 2 candidates there. For right backs, we have a definite candidate in Crépin Diatta. He's actually coded as a right midfielder, but he's been playing at the back here, Crépin Diatta. We also have a likely candidate in Antoine Mendy and a possible candidate in Ile Camara, both of those newcomers to the squad. Up to defensive midfielders, we have no candidates at the definite level, but a likely candidate in Pape Gueye, and then 3 possible candidates, Mamadou Camara, Nampalys Mendy, and newcomer Cheikh Niasse. Central midfielders, we have 3 definite candidates here, Idrissa Gueye, Pape Matar Sarr, and Habib Diarra. And then 2 candidates at the likely level, Lamine Camara and Pathé Ciss. Up we go now to the attacking midfielders. We begin on the left side where we have definite candidate Sadio Mane and likely candidate, though rarely starting games, Cheick Sabali. In fact, I don't think he started any games. On the right attacking midfield, we have a definite candidate in Ismaila Sarr and a possible candidate in Abdallah Sima. And for central attacking midfield, we have definite candidate Iliman Ndiaye, who for the last year has been playing more as a right attacking midfielder because they don't always use this position. So Iliman Ndiaye, a definite candidate there. And finally, we have the forwards, definite candidates Nicholas Jackson and Sharif Ndiaye, although Sharif Ndiaye doesn't start much. We have 2 likely candidates, Boulaye Dia and Habib Diallo, and that's it. Let's move on to big names off the squad. I don't think we have too many here. We do, though, probably the biggest name off the squad is manager Aliou Cisse, manager from 2015 to 2024, but now replaced. We have the forward Bamba Dieng, who has not appeared for the national team since March of 2024. And then we have Chaku Kouyaté. We gave more details on these in section 2, but all we can say here is that he has not appeared also since March of 2024. So there is a chance of them coming back into the team, especially Bamba Dieng. There. Let's take a look at injuries, because Senegal is plagued with injuries. We have Abdou Dialé, the central defender, who is a likely candidate. He's out with an unknown injury since late September and an unknown return date, so we'll put him there as an unknown. Next, we have left back Ismail Jacobs. He is out with a calf injury since late November. That's pretty recent, with an unknown return date also. So Ismail Jacobs also in the unknown. We have him as a likely candidate. Next, we have central midfielder Habib Diarra. He is a definite candidate here. He was out for groin surgery since mid-September, but he is expected back on December 12th. So we can update that in part 2, but he looks like he might be okay. Next, we have Lamine Camara, a central midfielder who we consider a likely candidate. He's out. He was out for the he was out for the October games with an ankle sprain, but he has returned to play for his club. So we can put him in the recovered section there. We also have forward Boulaye Dia, out with an ankle injury since the October games, but he too has recovered, so that's good news. And finally, we have forward Habib Diallo. This one seems a bit more serious. He's out with a hamstring injury from mid-November and an unknown return date. So Habib Diallo, unknown there. Bamba Dieng, also an injury concern, but since he's seemingly off the squad, we won't put him on the list here. Let's go. We'll skip closing thoughts here and just go straight to the preview for part 2. In part 2, we're going to release that probably in mid-September, when we know what the preliminary and final squad will be. And we can tell you which of the players on our list here made it and which ones didn't. And we'll highlight any notable non-selections, any surprise inclusions, and we'll introduce you to any new players who make the final squad. We have a lot of injuries to update, so hopefully we can give more current information on that as we will be closer to the Cup. And finally, part 2 includes our Spotlight review. That's our prediction of starters for the Cup. So that brings us to the end of part 1, our look at Senegal's players, and we hope you join us for part 2. We would like to thank Pixabay and Cold Fingers for the wonderful music used in this mediacast. The title of the piece is Eid Mubarak.